Welcome to the Healthy Skin Show with Jennifer Fugo, where we're flipping everything you've been told about your chronic skin issues upside down and connecting you with alternative solutions your dermatologist never told you about.
Welcome back to episode number 65 of the Healthy Skin Show. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about protein and why protein intake really matters when it comes to your skin. It's especially important when you're working on rebuilding that healthier skin, right? So whenever you've got to rebuild tissue, you've got to increase protein. This is especially true if you're also struggling with autoimmunity, leaky gut, IBS, chronic diarrhea or constipation, brain fog or memory recall, chronic fatigue, muscular weakness, poor sleep or even insomnia, food sensitivities, and gut infections, and that's a short list. But either way, you definitely cannot skimp on your protein intake. Even though you might think that you can just get it from your muscles, that's a bad idea. Catabolizing muscle tissue is a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's a bad thing. They are not our protein stores. So instead, we need to focus on bringing in enough to support new tissue building. What I've found is that most of my clients aren't eating enough protein. So let's talk about the ins and outs of protein so you can make better choices for yourself. Protein that's found in your diet is used to make new muscle tissue along with other tissue like new skin. And while it's really important for those things, people don't realize and oftentimes don't know that it's also used to make things like neurotransmitters, enzymes, hormones like your thyroid hormone, and other chemicals. These are responsible for making sure that your body runs optimally on a daily basis. Because I work with clients who are often addressing a number of different issues like gut infections, autoimmunity, chronic fatigue, thyroid problems, and brain function issues, while reversing their chronic skin issues, protein intake is key. The reality is that it's pretty common to not consume appropriate levels of protein, often because, well, you don't know how much protein you even need to eat. And you may have heard that you should cut back for the sake of your health and that of the planet. And while that is certainly a noble and reasonable concern, someone on a healing journey does not have the same luxury as somebody else who's healthy and well. Being sick or unwell for long periods of time changes the game. When your health is compromised, you have to remember that it then becomes critical to get enough macronutrients like protein, carbs, and fat, as well as those micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals, to refill the proverbial well. If you're serious about getting better, it's imperative to reduce or stop whatever's driving the inflammation and focus on rebuilding healthy tissue. But to do that, you must have enough raw materials coming in to accomplish that goal. I work with many eczema clients, for example, who were on all sorts of supplements for their skin before we started working together. But their protein intake turned out to be way too low. No amount of micronutrient supplementation could fix all of the issues because they just didn't have the protein available to help them in other areas. While I certainly applaud adding more plants into your diet, it's important to make sure that you are eating enough protein. And I know that the U.S. is by no means a protein-starved nation. But don't let that fool you into dropping your protein intake below what's appropriate for your particular circumstance. Now, if you've ever thought that all that protein, no matter the source, was created equal, that's sadly not true. It's not critical for you to eat meat per se, but if you choose to avoid it for whatever the reason, you'll need to be even more aware of your protein intake. The reason is that a lot of plant-based protein, that's also gluten-free, isn't as protein dense as animal products. And some proteins like soy aren't always advisable for everyone. Soy, for example, is contraindicated for anybody with low thyroid function and Hashimoto's thyroiditis. The question isn't which is better, animal protein or plant protein. What you should ask instead is how much protein your body will need to optimally function and rebuild healthy skin. Getting a balanced mix of plants and animal proteins is ideal, but there are many more veg-friendly options out there now that can help someone who isn't keen on eating meat or animal products. Something to consider is that iron is generally better absorbed from animal protein versus plant protein, and even more so when vitamin C from something like lemon juice is added to the meal. Additionally, sulfur-rich proteins are more commonly found in animal products. Sulfur, for example, is an important micronutrient that's often used to help with chronic skin conditions like eczema, psoriasis, and seborrheic dermatitis, as well as supporting your liver's detoxification system. That said, it's possible to be sensitive to different forms of animal proteins. I've had clients who've been diagnosed with the alpha-gal allergy, making them allergic to all mammalian protein, while others have pretty strong sensitivities to things like chicken, eggs, dairy, or even shellfish. Whether you consume animals, fish, or plants, your decision should be one that's focused less on dogma and more on what you actually need to heal. Find the best quality sources and focus on getting enough to allow your body to do this type of heavy lifting. So unlike fat and carbs, there really aren't any big protein storage centers in your body. That means you've got limited protein reserves to draw from when you don't eat enough of it. And there are consequences to low protein intake. When intake is too low, your body will steal the protein it needs from other areas that aren't as critical to keep you alive. Your skin, for example, is not as critical as your heart, brain, or kidneys. Skin is lower on the totem pole of organs. To be clear, I'm by no means implying that your skin condition or any chronic illness for that matter is simply a lack of protein in your diet. But it is an important piece of the puzzle. There are generally 16 root causes of chronic skin rash conditions, and typically people have anywhere from 3 to 5 of these root causes. Low protein intake can definitely play a role. When you eat protein, it doesn't just get randomly plugged in anywhere in your body in the form that you ate it. So let's take a moment to talk about protein digestion. Protein digestion begins in the stomach, where the environment is meant to be really acidic. Enzymes help speed up the process of protein digestion as the food moves into your small intestine. If you have low stomach acid or have taken acid-blocking medications for longer than a few months, digesting protein may be difficult. It's surprisingly common to have low stomach acid, and I find this often in my clinical practice. One sign of low stomach acid is if you stopped eating meat, shifted your diet to more plant-based, and then saw an improvement in your skin. Plus, those undigested proteins can trigger other gut issues like SIBO, leaky gut, and other GI problems. Each protein is broken down into its smallest building blocks. These are called amino acids. So let's head back for a moment to high school biology 101, which is probably not what you had in mind today, but hang in here with me for a moment. So imagine a big blob of Legos all stuck together. As a whole, this blob of Legos is like a protein, say from a burger or beans that you've eaten. Each individual Lego is a different amino acid. Once the amino acids are pulled apart from each other, they can be absorbed in your gut. Now, if they aren't broken down fully or absorbed, gut flora will ferment these proteins. That process is known as putrefaction, which is highly inflammatory. Assuming you absorbed all the amino acids, your body then uses them based on need and urgency. In total, there are about 20 different amino acids. Different combinations create all the different proteins found on Earth. And where things get tricky is that each amino acid is not created equal. Just like there are essential fatty acids, there are also essential amino acids. This means your body cannot produce or alter other amino acids in order to make these essential amino acids. They have to be consumed on a regular basis, or else you can become deficient. And a deficiency of these amino acids is a big deal. When there's a lack of a certain amino acid in your body, it can't simply replace what's missing with some other random amino acid. Each is different and has unique properties that make the end product, be it skin, muscle, hormones, neurotransmitters, work correctly. Swapping out even a single amino acid for another can cause serious problems even in a healthy person, and the effect can be even worse when you've got skin rashes. Now, you might be wondering, why can't I just supplement with collagen? It's a pretty common question. Collagen protein has become increasingly popular due to a variety of claims, some accurate and some not so much, that are peddled by health experts. That said, collagen is not a complete protein source, nor should it be used as your sole protein supplement if you do not consume enough protein. Doing so can contribute to amino acid deficiencies, since collagen is predominantly made up of two amino acids, glycine and proline. Collagen can be incredibly helpful as an additional supplement for leaky gut, chronic skin rash issues, and joint problems, and I often use it as part of my protocol in clients because I consider it to be a skin superfood. And here's the other piece to this that is important if you're wondering where collagen comes from. It is not the same as gelatin, by the way. Collagen is derived from different types of animal and seafood sources. There are no vegan or vegetarian sources of collagen on the market, despite the way that some products are marketed. Now, you might be wondering, well, this is all great information, Jen, but truthfully, how much protein do I really need to eat? And the answer to that depends on who you ask. It also depends on how healthy, active, and old you are. Those who are very active, somebody like a bodybuilder or a distance runner, will likely need more protein than someone who is sedentary. The RDA for a normal sedentary person is typically 0.8 grams per kilogram of your body weight. This means that you're going to have to convert your weight from pounds to kilograms. Now, that said, if you're trying to increase muscle mass, maybe you've been sedentary for a long time. That can sometimes happen when you haven't been feeling well or you're really exhausted. Research suggests that about 1 gram per pound of your ideal body weight is likely more effective. But what all of these articles don't address is how much protein you need to eat if you've got skin rashes and possibly other issues under the surface. Rebuilding healthy skin means you're asking your body to do a lot of heavy lifting. That heavy lifting requires more raw materials, like those amino acids we just talked about, to be available in order to get the job done right. Now, that said, just a little FYI, if you've got kidney issues, please talk to your doctor before increasing protein. Too much protein can overtax, compromise kidney function, and obviously that would not be a good thing. So in my clinical practice, I typically recommend higher protein intake in the range of 70 grams to 120 grams of protein daily. Where someone falls depends on their health status and a number of other factors. I'd say ideally, start out by shooting for at least 70 to 80 grams every single day. That's a great start, especially if you're not eating enough protein now. Keep in mind that higher protein is even more critical when it comes to healing wounds. Sometimes protein intake amounts can be 2 to 2.5 times the number of kilograms of body weight. And if you've got wounds due to something like eczema, you may need a significantly higher amount of protein to help reseal that skin. As I said, a lot of people are not getting enough protein, and it's one of the biggest problems I see in my clinical practice, especially when someone is hoping to rebuild healthy skin. They try their best based on all the information they find online, but the recommendations made for healthy people may not work for them. And they're often surprised to discover that a higher protein intake improves symptoms overall, as long as we ensure that it's digested and absorbed. No putrefaction, right? But the biggest challenge to increasing protein intake is actually knowing practically how much protein you need to eat in the first place. I mean, let's be honest, nobody actually knows what a gram looks like. And because of that, it can be really challenging to figure out how much protein you need to eat and if you're even eating enough right now. So the first step is to figure out how much protein you eat on average before you make any changes. And you can use a nutrition tracker or something like MyFitnessPal for 3 days to track everything you eat. Don't censor yourself here or alter the meals because you're trying to make everything look nice. Just enter in every single thing you put in your mouth. You get a baseline of the grams of protein that you currently eat now. This will tell you how much extra you'll need to consume and where you have gaps in your day that need to be filled. For example, if you don't eat any protein at lunch, then that would be a prime spot to add more in. Then to figure out how many protein grams you need daily, all you have to do is multiply your weight in kilograms by 1.25 or even 1.5, depending on how sick you are and how long you've been ill. The more healing that's required, the more protein that will likely be needed. If you eat a vegetarian or vegan diet, you will need to be especially aware of protein intake since many sources of plant-based protein aren't nearly as protein dense. Many of my clients are shocked to discover that they have to eat more beans and nuts since I advise clients to avoid things like soy, tempeh, and seitan. Additionally, many vegan sources of protein are not complete sources of protein, thus the complete 20 amino acid spectrum is not present. Now, one trick to overcome this is by eating quinoa, which is actually a complete protein source, but you can also combine legumes and grains. That will give you a complete protein source, so something like rice and beans, for example. To make things easier for you, I would say that you should shoot for about 25 grams of protein for each meal. Use a nutrient tracker to help you learn how much protein is in what you eat. That way, you can make it really practical and applicable to real life and learn how to eyeball how much is in what you eat. Now, to give you some ideas of how much is in certain things, a 1/4 pound burger patty, for example, is usually about 23 grams to 25 grams of protein. 1 chicken or duck egg equals 6 grams of protein. A full can of tuna is somewhere around 20 grams. And this is important and underscores why you can't just eat 1 egg for lunch or a half a can of tuna and be like, oh yeah, I'm good. You're probably not. That's not enough protein. As for legumes, there are some really good sources and some that might surprise you that don't have quite as much, but I've actually included a list with the amounts and the grams associated with those amounts in the show notes for today's episode. And as you will find, you've actually got to eat a lot more of plant-based protein sources to equal what you can get from animal sources. One downside is the massive amount of starch that can be present in these foods. And excessive starches in your diet can be contraindicated for gut infections and hormone imbalances that, yes, can all be root causes for chronic skin rash issues. That said, it's not impossible to see improvements on a vegetarian or vegan diet. I've had clients who are uncomfortable or just outright against eating animal-derived products. We've just got to work a little bit harder and smarter to keep them on the right track. Protein powders can be a huge help since they can be made into protein shakes or added to yogurt, pudding, or oatmeal. And FYI, vegan protein powders are often too low in protein based on their serving sizes. So you may have to take a look at how much is there and increase the amount that you're putting into your meal to get it closer to that 25 gram mark. Now, if you have any issues digesting proteins and you eat meat, there are some great hydrolyzed formulas of protein powders that are totally broken down already into their amino acids, meaning they're pre-digested and they're easy to absorb, and some taste really amazing. I also love and always recommend to add 1 tablespoon of collagen powder, which ends up being about 6 grams of protein, into your shake or your yogurt or any number of other options. You can also add it to your coffee, your tea, lattes, etc. I know this is a lot of information thrown at you, but I hope that it is helpful. And if you've got any questions or thoughts about protein and protein intake, leave a comment over at skinterrupt.com/065 and we can continue the conversation there. And don't forget, take a moment, rate and review the show on your podcast platform of choice. And as always, share this episode with someone you know who's trying to figure out how to fix their skin naturally. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.